I'm going to be totally honest here. Was this Sunday of football just terrible or just me? Maybe it was just my viewing experience overall that just didn't seem to hit the right way, but this just seems like everyone's getting hurt and every game is quite literally a low scoring contest. Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to our Sunday night live stream in which we're just going to go over the results of week 2 thus far. Still, we have tomorrow's game between the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Atlanta Falcons, but in terms of the overall content of what we received in terms of week 2, I think it was relatively underwhelming across the board. I mean, the first thing I said earlier this morning when we were doing our live stream specifically was the only two things that I ask from the fantasy universe is high scoring games and no injuries. And we get the opposite of both. So obviously it's just meant to be that injuries and low scoring games are going to just take place over the course of this fantasy season. So we're just going to have to figure it out as we progress. Now, the volume of injuries is so ridiculously high. Obviously today, Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Isaiah Pacheco, Evan Ingram, Tyjae Spears, Tank Bigsby, Taysom Hill, Pierre Strong, Marshawn Lloyd, Amon-Ra St. Brown. We know that already from this week. A.J. Brown was deemed out earlier today. So was Keenan Allen. Tua Tagovailoa earlier this week bonked in the dome. We had Raheem Mostert get his injury on that short week. Kenneth Walker missed the game. The volume of injuries is so ridiculously high. And obviously, I don't even mention Puka Nacua and Christian McCaffrey, obviously, earlier this week, going to injured reserve. But my goodness, the volume of injuries is absurd. I don't remember it being this gruesome at this point of a season to where we're getting impacted so negatively. But anyway, let's go ahead and let's talk about week 2. Again, many of you guys are going to ask questions in the live chat. We'll just go at a variety of different paths, whether it is talking about different teams. I have my thoughts on each of these games, having watched a good volume of each of them, but as we progress, we'll just go ahead and kind of give you our thoughts as we we figured this out. This is very interesting. The biggest bet that I had this weekend was $1,000 bet, and Alvin Kamara needed to get himself quite literally 4 receptions, and he couldn't do it because they blew out the Dallas Cowboys so effing badly. What a ridiculous turn of events. Either way, so Adam Amar sent in a super chat. He said, guys, you're buying and selling high potentially right now. Yeah, tomorrow's video, buy low, sell high. We'll talk about that as we get into tomorrow. Obviously, I'm going to do a little bit more research, before I get into specifically naming out names. Obviously, there's a lot of injuries that could impact the potential of that. We might want to go after players that are dealing with injuries right now in order to just have them on roster for the future. But it, again, is going to be very dependent on what exactly those injuries entail, how long they're potentially going to be out, etc. Another question that came in for you, super chat, before we continue on with the live chat. Craig sends in a question, says, I have Mason, Jalen Hurts, CeeDee Lamb, Drake London, Breece Hall, James Conner, Trey Benson, Travis Etienne, McConkey, J-Mo, Ferguson, Parkinson. Which should I offer for McCaffrey? Okay, if you're going to trade for McCaffrey, I would assume that the McCaffrey manager is going to want running back compensation in return. In your scenario, if you can bundle up Etienne with some other player, or maybe Connor and some other player, and they'd feel comfortable taking that in exchange for McCaffrey, I think that's the path that you want to probably take if possible. I'm not really too interested in giving away Hall in this scenario, so it's either Connor with another additional player, and obviously not a high value player, or ETN with another player, which would probably be the suggestion in this position. Craig, thank you. C. Banger sends in a question, says 12-team full PPR Superflex tight end premium starters or Mahomes/Stafford. Okay. Stafford is unstartable until, of course, you get the return of either of those wide receivers, which may be a while to say the very least. Additionally, JT, Najee, Rice, Ayuk, Moore, McBride. I'm currently 0-2. Should I panic? Mahomes, the broadcast just about 5 minutes ago before this game ended said that Mahomes' game today, 151 passing yards, is the second lowest in his career's history. I don't understand how that's physically possible. How is he regressing as a quarterback? You would assume that you get more weapons around him and he would progress as a player, but interestingly enough, it is not going in that direction. As for your situation with Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, Rice, Ayuk again is going to take a little while to progress in the right direction. Najee Harris is Najee Harris. You kind of knew what you were buying when you got in on the base floor of that. Rice is great. JT's fine. McBride is going to get more and more production as we progress here. DJ Moore's kind of in a shit show. So of your team, definitely don't love the scenario that you're in. That RB2 is definitely rough, and that wide receiver 3 isn't in a good spot. Neither is your QB1, but there's really nothing that you can do. I don't want you moving these pieces because, quite frankly, they are still good players. Ayuk just needs a little bit of time to get to his full, standard, and the Colts need maybe a new coach to figure out what the heck they're doing in the future. Thank you, C. Banger. Okay, so couple thoughts. I'm just going to start looking at the live chat and seeing what exactly we have. So Mario says the Colts lost my eliminator. So if you're playing if you were playing in a league in which you're picking winners and losers in a specific week, there were so many underdogs in this specific week that just outright won. I mean, besides the fact that you had the Dallas Cowboys, they get mollywopped by the Saints, 44-19. Okay, that is just a ridiculous thing. But the Raiders beating the Ravens, another huge surprise. The Buccaneers beating the Lions, the Vikings beating the 49ers, the Packers beating the Colts. I mean, shoot, even the Patriots forcing the Seattle Seahawks into overtime was surprising. The Cardinals beating the Rams, another underdog victory in these scenarios. And honestly, the Bengals should have won that game. I don't care what anybody says. A lot of BS calls in the end of that one just to make sure that the Chiefs pull out a victory. They should have won that game. There should have been, quite frankly, the entire Sunday slate was underdog victories. That's what it should have been and would have, kind of should have turned out to be. But in the case of the Colts, really quickly, just to kind of give you guys my thoughts, I am henceforth, I told you guys earlier this morning, every time I doubt a player at a really high capacity, especially a player of high skill, they play extremely well. And that's exactly what Josh Jacobs did. That's why I moved him up in my rankings in comparison to where I had him on Tuesday, because I had a feeling that he was going to bite me in the ass. And of course, he came out and he played well. Obviously, he fumbled, could have had himself 6 additional points, but he had an 8-point swing. So where instead of getting 6+, he lost 2. So, he finished with 15 fantasy points, 30 rushing attempts. That's 2 weeks in a row where the Indianapolis Colts defense has allowed a running back to run on them 30+ times. Joe Mixon in week 1, Josh Jacobs in week 2. I am firing up DeAndre Swift preemptively going into week 3 within the matchup. The Colts defense is an absolute mess, and their offense, quite frankly, is non-existent. Sure, they can run the ball, whether it's, Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, doesn't really matter. Both of them are going to find success. But Anthony Richardson seriously is struggling. He cannot throw the ball against solid defenses. But for fantasy purposes, we don't really have to worry. He is a garbage time quarterback. He is going to get his fantasy points. He's going to turn over the ball, but any of the pieces around him, I mean, obviously Alec Pierce seems to be his favorite. Outside of that, really, there's no hope for Michael Pittman Jr. based on the first 2 weeks of overall production and opportunity share. But yeah, as it currently stands, Richardson is pretty much, in my mind, the Blake Bortles of this league. I mean, he's a part of a terrible team that doesn't play defense, and he's going to be in garbage time because he makes too many errors early and puts himself into bad situations. So as of right now, those are, just a couple initial thoughts there. Now, as for the Packers, congratulations. I don't even know how they won that game, I'll be honest. Obviously they beat the shit out of the Colts defense. That's what they did. They ran the ball. And like I said earlier this morning, what Gus Bradley does is he finds himself in situations as a defensive coordinator of the Colts where he will purposely say, this is the defense that I'm going to play, and I'm not going to change it for anything. And you're basically asking for teams to show up and shove the ball down your throat. And that's what happened for 2 weeks straight. All right, let's see here. We had a couple super chats sent in. We had one from YG who says, of the round 2 wide receivers, Marvin Harrison was great and Olave showed life today. Will London do the same? I'm hoping so. Look, again, this is why we don't panic in week 1, especially for players that we drafted highly. Now, the player that I'm beginning to worry about amongst all those kind of wide receivers is Garrett Wilson. Marvin Harrison, fantastic. Again, from what we saw on Thursday's game with, Tua Tagovailoa not playing well, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle being non-factors even prior to Tua's injury, it goes to show that Buffalo Bills secondary really is good. And going forward, we want to be careful with our wide receivers within that given matchup. Not to say that it's impossible, but just to give you some context as to, yes, it is a difficult matchup when you have 1 week Marvin Harrison a non-factor to the next week being the top wide receiver at the position. So obviously both those guys great. London should be fantastic tomorrow. We're hoping that's going to be the case, especially considering he takes on the Philadelphia secondary. That is really the weakness of that defense as a whole. Hopefully they can show signs of life in that scenario. But yeah, Garrett Wilson's the guy that I'm beginning to worry about. Very much so limited usage. I understand that earlier today against the Tennessee Titans, it was very much so a difficult matchup, specifically taking on L'Jarius Sneed. L'Jarius Sneed, a former number one cornerback of the Chiefs last season, obviously was traded and got a massive deal with the Tennessee Titans this offseason. So that there's a huge upgrade to that secondary, which makes it difficult. But still, I'm beginning to worry in that scenario. We move on to Adam Amar, who has a follow-up, says, I want to package Justin Jefferson and Brian Robinson Jr. for Christian McCaffrey and Nico Collins. I have Jordan Mason, Kyron Williams, Eckler, Zeke, Ayuk, Pickens. I don't mind that trade at all. I think if you get Christian McCaffrey and Nico Collins in that scenario with the condition that you have Jordan Mason, I think in the long run, it probably serves you best. Now, in this scenario, you're taking Christian McCaffrey from him and you're giving him a running back, and considering he has Jerome Ford, Adam, I want to also let's transition and talking into about Jerome Ford, because that really is a topic of interest that many of us probably want to get into. Somehow, some way, despite the fact that there was no signs of D'Onta Foreman last week, he shows up this week and gets the vast majority of the rushing attempts in this offense. Cleveland Browns have somehow within 7 days changed their starting running back without letting anybody know. Jerome Ford, despite the fact that he played the vast majority of offensive snaps, still was outcarried, I think, 7-14 in the favor of D'Onta Foreman, which going forward in our waiver wire episode this upcoming Tuesday, that's going to be a player that we certainly want to get our hands on if, in fact, he's going to continue to be the clear and away RB that is carrying the rock. Pierre Strong went down with a hamstring injury, so it's Ford or D'Onta Foreman, and if they continue to favor Foreman in this circumstance, he's certainly going to have value for fantasy. I mean, even last year as a member of the Chicago Bears, great value. The year prior as a Carolina Panthers, great value. So we have seen D'Onta Foreman be a solid running back, and going forward could certainly be a waiver wire pickup that we want to specifically pick up. Thank you for the question, Adam. Let's see here. Raider Mang says, hey, Andrew, should I trade away Tyreek Hill for Amon-Ra? Amon-Ra went down with a little bit of a knee injury, as to what I'm understanding, was limping for a lot of that game in the second half. We're going to have to wait and see what exactly that knee injury kind of revolves around. If that's something that is going to force him to miss time, which it very easily could. Obviously, Jameson Williams is going to continue to benefit. It looks like Jameson Williams is not going anywhere anytime soon. The volume of targets that he has inherited and the fact that Sam Laporta is completely missing, we might need to go out and put up posters to find Sam Laporta, because I can't find him. I don't know where he is in that offense. Quite honestly, I don't know where Jared Goff went. Whoever's throwing the ball for the New Orleans Saints looks a lot like Jared Goff, while the guy who's throwing the ball for the Detroit Lions this season looks like Derek Carr. I don't know what's going on. We got a Freaky Friday body switch, but that's what we're experiencing as of late. And hopefully somebody can tell me what is going on. Why is it that, the great quarterbacks of last year are starting to just falter so quickly thus far this season? Either way, in your scenario, again, we'll have to wait and see, but I don't mind it if Amon-Ra's healthy and ready to go for the remainder of the season. I think that's a solid pivot in your circumstance going forward there. Thank you for your question, Raider. After Raider's question, we had one from, let's see here. Okay, we had Christopher Garza, who says, in a 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex league, I have Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Jacobs, and Walker as my running backs. Okay, so you've got too many good running backs. And your wide receivers are Ayuk, Kirk, and Higgins. Okay. Christian Kirk's dead. I mean, I don't know what happened. The fact that Evan Ingram was absent, and I mean, when I watched this game back earlier today, I mean, I watched a little bit of it obviously on Red Zone, a little bit of it on the NFL Plus apps in terms of game replay. It just purely looks like Trevor Lawrence has regressed as a quarterback. This is what I'm talking about. How is it that quarterbacks of the past are regressed so greatly? Trevor Lawrence was throwing to the backup tight end the whole day. Sure, we saw a couple big plays from Brian Thomas Jr., but outside of that, it purely was a matter of like, where's the tight end position? I'm throwing to it regardless of whether or not Evan Ingram is out there, because I think the game plan going into the week was to feed Evan Ingram, and because he got injured pre-game, like, they didn't know how to pivot. And here we go, the backup tight ends, if I'm not mistaken, let's see this. Let's see how many potential targets he got. If I go and I find the game, if I go to stat book, let's go to team, let's go to the offenses. So, yeah, I mean, okay, Strange, their backup tight end, 6 total targets within the game. Like, that's a ridiculous number. And we have Christian Kirk sitting at 3 targets for 1 reception and -1 receiving yards. It is ridiculous. It's beyond me. Okay, as for your question, though, yes, obviously you're in desperate need of a wide receiver, Christopher Garza. Should I trade Jonathan Taylor and Ayuk for Jefferson. I think you're giving up too much if you give up both of those two pieces. I would try to trade your running backs for individual 1-for-1s if possible, rather than sending 2 players for one, considering you are in desperate need of wide receivers, and giving away the talent aspect of Ayuk would do yourself a disservice in the grand scheme of this overall season. So I'm looking for 1-for-1s. Again, tomorrow we're going to go ahead and talk about videos in terms of players that I want to trade for, specifically at the wide receiver position as of buy low potential prospects. It'll be at a variety of different positions, just so you can go out and try to see if you can make trades of that capacity. But yeah, you definitely need a wide receiver too until Higgins returns, which again we don't know what the status of him is going to be. You might look to if I'm looking to trade one of your running backs, it probably ends up being Walker before I do move Jonathan Taylor, Henry, or Jacobs. But if nobody is interested, obviously taking one of those bigger pieces like a Jonathan Taylor, I'm gonna try to go get a far better piece. Well, technically not a better piece than Justin Jefferson, but I'm going to try to get a better piece than having to, shell out 2 of my players for one. Bro Pros sends in a question, says, what do I do with Tank Dell? In a Dynasty League, I'm starting to get frustrated. Yeah, I mean, at this point, you kind of have to just bench him until otherwise noted. Now, there are going to be weeks where he's going to have pop-off performances, but clearly, in a way, Nico Collins is still the number 1, and everybody else is playing secondary role. Obviously, they didn't play well as an offense today, altogether. There was an opportunity in that game. I'm sure many of us were watching it where Tank Dell, beats the defense, is made a play over the top of them, but CJ Stroud isn't able to put it, and deliver a ball that is able to specifically let him continue to run in a full stride. Unfortunately, isn't able to make that reception. Could have very easily scored a 50-plus yard reception in the game. Opportunities are there, but obviously they're not of quality to the point to where Tank Dell is being able to deliver. I mean, shoot, he runs an out route in the ball is already 6 yards out of bounds before he even turns around. So tough situation. We're going to bench him until otherwise noted. But, this week we benched Jackson Smith and Jigba across the board in a lot of overall circumstances. And the guy had an incredible game. And while on the topic, specifically of Jackson Smith and Jigba, for the Seahawks today, I mean, seeing signs of life from Metcalf and JSN, beautiful. Love to see it. Hopefully that'll continue to persist for the remainder of the season. Zach Charbonnet played well as he was supposed to. We're going to expect to see Kenneth Walker return, but obviously considering all the Rams injuries, this could be a year in which the Seattle Seahawks can once again vie for a playoff position. But on the other side, in terms of the overall Patriots, obviously the Patriots are a better team than we initially anticipated. Ramondre Stevenson for another consecutive week of great performance, which is great. I'm glad many of us started him. Hunter Henry, fantastic. I mean, obviously, this is an offense that I've mentioned all offseason. They have a tight ends coach as an offensive coordinator. He came from, the Kevin Stefanski coaching tree, where he always gets the tight end position involved. Luckily, Hunter Henry in week 2 is going to be a huge potential impact player for the waiver wire. Many of us who picked up, Isaiah Likely last week are disappointed with his overall performance, but there are guys like Hunter Henry and the thumbnail from earlier this week, Mike Gesicki, that had pretty solid performances within the overall day. All right, let's see here. Moving on from Bros Pros to MTD, who says, should I sell Kyren Williams and Dobbins after this week? Kyren Williams is going to be hard to sell. I don't know how you're going to be able to sell him considering the structure of that offense is in complete shambles. If Cooper Kupp is going to miss consistent time, and even if he's going to miss, he may not be healthy for the remainder of the year. Again, this is kind of a tough situation depending on how this high ankle sprain is going to potentially affect him. As for Dobbins, I mean, he looks good. It is tough to sell a player that looks good in this kind of scenario. Obviously, he split overall touches, snaps, all that kind of jazz with Gus Edwards, but clearly he is the preferred back of the two, and they're going to continue to give him those opportunities. So Kyren, I want to say yes, because no offensive line, no quarterback production, and no offense because the receiving game isn't able to at least open up the opportunity. Teams are just going to stack the box against them. But it's going to be difficult to sell. It really is. AMZG Eric says, I got Mahomes, Jacobs, Achane, St. Brown, Rice, Likely, Ferguson, Godwin, Spears, Swift, Lazard, and Watson. What do I need? And how do I make it happen? I mean, look, at this point, Mahomes, you're not really trading. St. Brown, you're not trading. Rice, you're not trading. Jacobs and Achane stay as is. Godwin's a great overall player. Ferguson and Likely, again, you're going to wait until Ferguson returns, and Likely will be in his stead because you spent too much fab capital in order to bench him after just one game. Spears is dealing with an injury. Swift is kind of that positional rotation once bye weeks start to swing along. really, if you want to make moves, you can try. But when I look at your team as a whole, I don't think I'm really your biggest lack of impact is at quarterback. So if you want to try to improve from Mahomes and try to go after somebody else, you can try. But quite honestly, I think it's going to be difficult. They're going to ask for way too much in exchange. Way too much. Outside of that, I mean, like, you could try to move Achane, but again, I don't want to move Achane until I get really more context regarding Tua and his timeline. Jacobs looks fine without Jordan Love, so why not Achane without, Tua? Still looking good. There's always a possibility of that. And the rest of your team is pretty solid. So, again, Mahomes is the issue, but it's going to be tough to upgrade from him. You're going to have to go get a Jalen Hurts, which typically Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen don't just, grow on trees to the point to where people are handing them out. They usually hold them at high capital. The Watch Hangout sends in a super chat. I knew a question like this would eventually come along, and it finally has. His question is, has Taylor Swift destroyed Travis Kelce? Hashtag it's over. And it has 4 likes on it already. Wow. Interesting. It's no comment. No comment at this time. I'm going to say that ultimately, I think Patrick Mahomes has destroyed him, and it's a quarterback that typically, when you have quarterback of the level of Patrick Mahomes, the understanding is that he should elevate the receiving threats around him accordingly. Obviously, that is not happening. So if they can't reciprocate in terms of making him better and he's not making them better, we're in a lot of trouble. But as for his personal life mattering, it doesn't bother me. I don't give a shit. As long as he shows up on Sunday healthy, that's all that matters. God's Gang sends in a question, says, should Breece Hall owners be worried? Yes, you should pick up Braylon Allen in every single league. The fact that Braylon Allen yoinks 2 touchdowns this week is something that I'm not comfortable with, and I don't really want to talk about, but I will talk about it because it is it is pretty important. Braylon Allen is probably someone that is in my top 6 running back pickups going into the week, and we should absolutely be addressing that. Angelo sends in a question, says, full PPR with Ingram out and Christian Kirk with 3 targets, 1 reception, and 0.9 points. Is it too soon to move on from him? I don't think it's too soon. If not, I'll wait. No, I don't think it's too soon. We wait for the waiver wire video, and we'll kind of pivot from there. But I don't think so. Like, the whole question is, are you going to find a better receiver on the waiver wire in comparison in terms of potential for upside? If you can, then let's go ahead and let's try it. Because quite frankly, the first 2 weeks of Christian Kirk's usage, opportunity share, etc., are horrendous, and it is scaring me because Trevor Lawrence does not look like he knows what he's doing. Let's see here. God's Gang says, who takes over for Pacheco if he's out? If Pacheco's out, the rushing upside all goes to, what's his name? Their quote-unquote fullback, which is, again, I don't know why they've designated him as the quote-unquote fullback of the Kansas City Chiefs offense, because they don't use a fullback, but it's Carson Steele. So Carson Steele would be the running back in terms of rushing attempts. And then Samaje Perine would get a couple opportunities here and there, but Samaje Perine would primarily be the receiving threat in the absence of Isaiah Pacheco. Again, for those of you who are wondering, again, Isaiah Pacheco did in fact leave the game with an injury, left the game and was seen on crutches and in a walking boot. So nothing of that overall situation is positive, and it looks like we are going to have another another widely played, started early draft capital player, unfortunately injured for the next couple weeks. Aiden 0815 says, I have Kupp and St. Brown. My other wide receivers are Ayuk, Ridley, and Addison. Should I be concerned? Ridley showed signs of life. It's interesting. I said Ridley this week, it's going to be tough going up against the Jets. His initial first touchdown is a rushing touchdown. And then additionally after that, finally, Will Levis starts to just completely use his cannon of an arm and just fire off a couple opportunities there. One of them landing in the direction of Ridley and scoring a touchdown. So Ridley kind of progressing in the right direction. Obviously, the first 2 weeks of matchups has been difficult because of the defenses they've played, but hopefully they'll continue to build a rapport and he'll have more value going forward. Ayuk, again, is going to it's going to take a little while for Ayuk to get to 2023 status. Probably a couple more weeks. But yeah, your Kupp and St. Brown situation is tough. Kupp's probably going to miss a couple weeks. Hopefully St. Brown doesn't miss any time, but who knows, man. Injuries are tough to predict. RJ sends in a question, says, PPR, trade Gibbs for Christian McCaffrey and Rice. I have Jonathan Taylor, Kenneth Walker, and James Conner. You are in one of the more luxurious positions. If I was you, I wouldn't do it. Unless you have Jordan Mason, I don't think I'm actively trading for Christian McCaffrey. I think it's a little bit too risky. I'd rather just keep Gibbs. and or potentially just trade Gibbs 1-for-1 for another wide receiver. Like, yeah, I'd rather just go trade Gibbs 1-for-1 for another wide receiver. But in your scenario, the only issue that I have, RJ, making a trade of this capacity is like James Conner, again, can never stay healthy, has never stayed healthy his whole career, has always missed time. Kenneth Walker is already missing time this season. If you were to bring in Christian McCaffrey and something was to happen to your other running backs prior to Christian McCaffrey's injured reserve return, it really leave you vulnerable. And I don't want you to be losing games early on because of a mistake of this kind of capacity. Overall, look, if Christian McCaffrey and Rashee Rice are fully healthy, yes, it's worth having them both on roster. But I'm just concerned about the lack of potential depth. Like, if you're going to make this trade, you're going to have to go pick up handcuffs for everyone. Like, you need to have Charbonnet, you need to have Trey Benson, you need to have Trey Sermon for all of your running backs in order to make sure that you're never left out naked in an injury situation, which again are continuing to pile up every single week. Infinity and Bijan says, my team is Kyler, Najee, Josh Jacobs, Mostert, Jalen Wright, Kupp, CeeDee Lamb, Keon Coleman, Josh Palmer, McBride, Jay Smith. 14-man full PPR. What moves do I make with Kupp being hurt? Oh, man. Najee Harris, I don't love as your RB2. Mostert is injured. Jalen Wright doesn't really have much value. Jacobs is the only one there. Kyler's fine. CeeDee's fine. Keon Coleman's not a factor. Neither is Joshua Palmer now that he's hurt. McBride is in a solid situation. So you've basically got 2 or 3, 4 solid players, Infinity and Bijan. Then you got a bunch of injured players, which really doesn't help you in your overall scenario. If you're probably looking at the team in your league that feels like they're at the top of the world and have so much depth across the board, and you're trying to go and trade Kupp there, because if Kupp's going to miss time and you have no time to wait for him to return in a 14-man league. Again, if it's a 14-man league and 8 teams are making the playoffs, you have to win games now. In this scenario, yeah, you'd probably have to move your valuable pieces in the matter of Kupp to a team that can sustain not having him for the next couple weeks and try to get wide receiver help in return. Phil sends in a question, says, 12-team, 4-point per passing touchdown format, full PPR. We have Dak, Geno, Hall, Etienne, Edwards, Hubbard, Smith, London, Godwin, McConkey, Hopkins, Judy, along with Andrews. I'm 1-1 after today. Any sell-high candidates to improve? In terms of your team, no, not technically. Quarterbacks are solid. Hall and Etienne you have to keep. Your other running backs are irrelevant. As for Smith, London, Godwin, they're all solid there. I'm not selling Godwin. As much as I loved his overall production the last 2 weeks, unless you're going to sell him for top 12 potential upside wide receivers, I'm not moving Godwin because it doesn't look like he's leaving anytime soon from the overall workload. Mark Andrews had let me see actually, how much of an overall solid game did Mark Andrews actually have? In terms of overall snap counts, when I was looking at it, he played more snaps. They used a lot less potential 12 personnel within the overall week, which all of it bodes well for the usage of Mark Andrews. 5 targets, 4 receptions, 51 receiving yards, outpaced likely in all 3 categories. But really, it was just a matter of the offense did not function properly in the red zone, or he could barely even get down there to function. So the Raiders definitely put up a good fight. And obviously, Gardner Minshew outplayed the likes of Lamar Jackson today. It's not even close how much he outplayed him. But yeah, Mark Andrews really can't sell high on. So the only option you would have in terms of sell high technically would be Godwin, but you'd have to go knocking on doors for legitimately high tier players that you'd want in return, and they'd have to be a wide receiver. Thank you, Phil. All right, let's see here. Lexel sends in a question. Says, in a 12-team half PPR, 2 running backs, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex league, we have Burrow, Goff, Gibbs, Ford, Mostert, Tyjae Spears, Jaleel McLaughlin, along with Debo, Nico, Evans, Waddle, Neighbors. Okay, so you're stacked at wide receiver along with Trey McBride. How do I improve my team? I mean, as it currently stands, you need an RB2 because you don't have one. Ford, Mostert, Tyjae Spears, Jaleel McLaughlin are not the answer. So in your scenario with Debo, Nico, Evans, Waddle, and Neighbors, you can very easily go and pick and choose whatever running back that you want and trade for it because you have enough wide receiver depth to do so. So you can go and try to find a team that is going to be dealing with an Amon-Ra, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Justin Jefferson injury in the coming weeks, and try to go sell them on a wide receiver if they need that depth in order to bring a running back in exchange. Obviously, it's going to be very dependent on which teams in your league need a wide receiver and have the running back depth to bring it back in your direction. But that's what you're looking for because you have 5 solid wide receivers. And even though you play in a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex league, you can certainly afford to lose one in order to bring in an RB2 because you quite frankly just don't have an RB2 at this current circumstance. Thank you. Big Cat sends in a question, says, trade Deontay Johnson and Brandon Cooks or Jacoby Myers for Dell. Yeah, don't mind whatever they want. Cooks, Myers, Deontay, whatever it is, just boot it away. We don't want it. We'll take Dell in exchange. That's fine. National Champ Rush says, thoughts on Jaden Daniels, Purdy, and Rachaad White? Yeah, okay, so a couple thoughts. First and foremost, the Washington Commanders, if they let him run that much every single week, he is I mean, I don't want to say it, but he's going to get hurt. You cannot run at that capacity, at that much of a volume, not sliding, and expect to be okay. Like 10 plus rushing attempts per game, you have to start to slide. Truly. So hopefully they either smarten him up or they tell him, hey, if you don't start sliding, like we're going to have our own teammates tackling you because this just does not work. We cannot put you in jeopardized situations here. Additionally, I was quite honestly surprised that we could go an entire game of football and not get a single effing offensive touchdown from the Washington Commanders. The fact that the Giants scored 2 offensive touchdowns and still lost in comparison is wild. But in terms of that game as a whole, Terry McLaurin, 8 targets, 6 receptions, we'll take it. Not great though. Doesn't seem like anybody in that offense garners a high enough potential for favor to where they're super valuable. Really, the most valuable piece outside of Jaden Daniels, because he is still of value, is Brian Robinson Jr., and that's it, as it currently stands. As for the other side of the ball for the New York Giants, I told y'all that these rookie wide receivers were going to have big weeks here. Malik Neighbors, again, in the easiest matchup you could possibly find against the Washington Commanders, 10 receptions for $127 and a touchdown. Fantastic. We love to see it, and hopefully that'll just continue to pile up. And obviously, coming off of a 12-week potential 12 target week, Wan'Dale Robinson still got himself a lucky touchdown, which, we'll take. Sorry, they scored 3 offensive touchdowns and still lost in comparison to Washington. Like, that is ridiculous. Let's see here. Connor sends in a question, says, what players would you consider trading Kyren for? Let me see here. Let's go pull this up, shall we? It depends. Are you trying to get a running back in exchange? Because if that's what you're looking for, it's not going to be easy. Like, as a whole, if you're trying to move the one and only Kyren Williams and recoup running back value, it's not to say that he's not going to have value going forward. It's that, again, I have a hard time trusting that offense if Stafford has no one to throw the ball to. So if you can't get first downs, how are you going to run the ball effectively? I'd go knock on the door of like someone who has Derrick Henry. I mean, again, it's going to be tough, but I don't want to sell him for cheap. I'd still go knock on like ETN doors, Jonathan Taylor doors. If Mixon didn't get hurt, I would go knock on that door, but he got hurt, so that doesn't really help. Those are the kind of players that I'm still trying to garner. I'm not going out and trying to sell him for J.K. Dobbins or anything like that. I still want higher tier players because I know that they will still produce in the future. If you can somehow, some way, I was gonna say maybe David Montgomery, but I think that's too cheap. I don't really want to sell him for that yet. Yeah, those are the kind of the names that I'll go for. Worst case scenario, Kenneth Walker if you have Charbonnet, but outside of that, really nothing else. Aiden 80815 says, what do you think about Addison for rest of season? I mean, the fact that the Minnesota Vikings are, it's interesting. The Minnesota Vikings the last 2 seasons have beaten the 49ers. So it seems like, they have their number. The defensive coordinator, the offensive play caller, Kevin O'Connell, they have their number. So once Addison is healthy, whenever that is, again, he's still dealing with an ankle injury, he will get usage. But the fact of the matter is, we're all just waiting for TJ Hawkinson to come back. And once TJ Hawkinson does, Addison really doesn't really have much, he doesn't have much value. He's going to be utilized to an extent to where he has weekly upside in a powerful matchup where you play against the Washington Commanders or a terrible secondary of some nature. Fine, you can play him, but ultimately it's going to be the Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson show once Hawkinson returns. Elseway says, time to worry about Michael Pittman Jr. and Kirk. Yeah, I'm full-blown panic mode. Like, to the extent to where we need to try to see if we can find alternative options because the quarterback play is what the issue is. It's not the wide receivers, it's the quarterbacks. So when the root of the problem begins at the guy who's throwing the ball, that is that begins to worry me more than anything. Sell high on JSN. I mean, you technically could, but I mean, shoot. If you have JSN, Pittman, and Kirk right now, the thing is, selling JSN off of that volume is great. It's not a bad idea. But if you don't bring back a wide receiver, you're going to be in a little bit of a tricky situation because you already have Pittman Kirk that you cannot trust as of right now that could probably sit on your bench until they have a pop-off performance, and then you try to sell them accordingly. But selling JSN as it currently stands, I mean, that's not easy either. Because someone's going to look at their week 1 performance and say, well, all right, he did it once. How do I know that he can do it again and again and again every single week? That's the issue that lies within that overall scenario. It's like selling Calvin Ridley after this week. How does anybody know that for sure? I mean, at least Calvin Ridley has the production from last year, but JSN doesn't. He doesn't have that concrete production as a base floor. As of right now, if you can, guys, where I'm typically looking to sell or potentially buy low on, I'm trying to buy low Garrett Wilson. That's what I'm trying to do. Now, we'll talk about that more tomorrow, but whether JSN is involved in that is, dependent on who in your league is actually interested in JSN. Sammy sends in a question, says, hey, Andrew, crazy Sunday so far. Yeah, no, this was one of the worst. I mean, I'll tell you objectively. But should I consider grabbing Jalen Naylor based on this performance since Addison is still questionable? Addison's questionable. Jefferson's dealing with an injury. Hawkinson's still out. Yeah, let's pick him up. He's probably a solid potential pickup in a deeper league there. David Waters sends in a super chat. David, I don't see anything attached to your question or super chat. Let me see if I can look up your name and find it here. David Waters says, lost Kupp and Pacheco. So I have Hurts, Bijan, Pacheco, Kupp, Debo, Pitts, and Kelsey. Is Pirine a solid pickup? I mean, yeah, Pirine would, I think it's Carson Steele. I mean, did Pirine get much of the rushing upside in this game after? I'd have to go look at the overall game script of how it panned out. But yeah, if I was to specifically tell you who I think is going to be the clear running back rushing the ball, it's going to be Carson Steele in the absence of Pacheco. If in fact Pacheco is going to miss significant time, which it seems like he may in fact will, do that, considering he's walking in a walking boot / using crutches to get out of the stadium. Mark L says the 49ers haven't beat the Vikings since 1994. That seems like some sort of bad juju curse. Interesting. Galactic123 says 12-man PPR. Trade Alvin Kamara and AJ Brown for Kupp and Breece Hall. I don't think I'm trading for injured players here's the thing. I can trust that AJ Brown will return, younger player, and be healthy, and I'll have no issue with it. Kupp, that's tough. It's far more of a potential gamble, especially considering Kupp just got hurt, and I don't know how long he could potentially miss, and what kind, again, it could be far worse than we already know. They do a couple tests and MRI on it, the guy's out on the injured reserve. We don't know. So if you want to potentially cash in, if you have Kupp to send him away, you can try to do so, but in this scenario, I think I keep what you have, Galactic. Nathan sends in a question, says Pacheco went down. I'm thin at running back. Rashee Rice for Pollard in the trade. Full PPR, my wide receivers are Wilson, Jefferson, Flowers, and Rice. Pollard is probably a guy that, considering the Tyjae Spears injury and the fact that he's looked great, I don't have an issue with it at all. I think, Pollard's played beyond his overall means thus far. National Champ Rush says, thoughts on Purdy, White, Henry. Should I sell high? Henry, I'm not really selling. Again, I think he's going to continue to be unless that's Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry, you might be able to sell high. Derrick Henry, I'm leaving as is. Purdy's thoughts, again, when you don't have Christian McCaffrey out there and you don't have the ability to dump the ball off to get 7 receptions for 70 yards within a singular game and a receiving touchdown, whenever your production is limited to you just being a drop back passer and having to look down the field, and one of your potential best receivers in the form of Ayuk is in a shell of himself, and Debo and Kittle are the only ones that can actively produce, obviously we're going to get a lack of production in comparison to, what we saw from Purdy last season. So it's going to take a progress of once Ayuk returns, once McCaffrey returns, Purdy's overall upside will be significantly higher. As for Rachaad White, we're seeing more and more of Bucky Irving, mainly because Rachaad White gets no rushing upside at all. But the fact that he had 0 receiving utilization is so alarming today that I'm just going to throw it up to it being a fluke, because we haven't seen him get that little of production in terms of the receiving game in quite a while here, since he's been the full-blown starter last season. All right, let's see here. MIGZ sent in a super chat. Let me see where. Okay, he says, just got Amon-Ra. T. Higgins is still out. BTJ is my wide receiver 1, LOL. Yeah. Up 17, playing Pitts in a half PPR. You think I win? You're up 17, you're playing against Kyle Pitts. I think you would win this week. If Kyle Pitts was to score 18 fantasy points, I would quite honestly be shocked. Also, should I trade Brian Robinson Jr.? Much love. Yeah, look, Here's the fact of the matter. Brian Robinson looks good. He is in an offense where the offensive coordinator prioritizes his rushing attempts, and we know that Austin Eckler isn't digging into his workload at a high volume. His only threat really is Jaden Daniels on the goal line. So ultimately, you can try to sell him now and try to get value out of him, but it's just a matter of, are you trading him to try to get a running back in exchange? If you are, oftentimes you're probably going to just have to go and buy low on a couple of the guys that haven't played well, like a Rashad White, and just hope that somebody's willing to give you that, which I don't think they will, but those are the kind of players that I'm looking for. Jordan McQueen says, trade Bowers for Kelsey. I have Andrews. If you have Bowers and Andrews, I'm trying to trade Bowers for a running back or a wide receiver. I'm not trying to trade him for Kelsey in this circumstance, but you're on the right track in terms of potentially moving him. Bowers looked like the best tight end in the league today. Besides Kittle, he looked like the best tight end in the league. Obviously, because Kittle has the run blocking aspect that makes him the all-around better player. But in terms of like receiving work, Bowers looked great. So I don't know if I'm trading him for another tight end. I'm more in line to potentially trade him for a receiver or a running back going forward. Seventh Season says, pick up Josh Downs and stash. I don't know how much of a difference that's going to make, considering, of course, Anthony Richardson can't complete a pass 5 yards away from him. But we could try it. If he's going to sit on your IR, it works. Kaimi Fairbairn is the GOAT, says B. Normie. You're not wrong, B. Normie. He is. He is fantastic. He was incredible last season prior to his injury. When I was doing research this offseason in terms of kicker production, he was at the top of the list in terms of fantasy points per game last year and the last couple of years. He's had some of the best in terms of total accuracy at the further range of 50-plus yards. So when we're talking about fantasy leagues where you're getting 5+ points for a kicker's overall kick, and you're kicking the ball 5 field goals in a singular game, obviously you're going to be a 20-point monster and win people weeks, which obviously for some instances is tough if you're losing to that. But if you're winning by it, we'll take it. Better to pick up Ty Chandler or Carson Steele? I think it depends on what exact information we get in the next 2 days regarding Pacheco's injury. If they say that Pacheco's going to the IR, then I'm willing to go pick up a Carson Steele. If they're saying that Pacheco's going to be starting this upcoming week and he gets a practice in by, Tuesday, then at that point we're sitting here and thinking, all right, let's just take it easy. Maybe pick up Carson Steele if we have Pacheco just to have the handcuff in case he doesn't play by Sunday. If anything was to regress, maybe he re-aggravates the injury. But as of right now, I think it's very dependent on what exactly we hear based on the information that they release tomorrow. Jersey Style says, JMO's wheels in a full PPR in a 12-man league. If yes, who are we playing him over? Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, look, Jameson Williams is not going anywhere. They've literally cut out Laporta in order to ensure that Jameson Williams gets more opportunities. So as it currently stands, JMO, you're starting over a lot of players going forward. He's going to move up my rankings very, very quickly here, considering how much opportunity he gets and the Amon-Ra news. Ando says, I'm down 25 points and a half PPR. I need London and Jake Elliott to have a big game. I don't think it's impossible, honestly. Jake Elliott's a solid kicker. He could very easily, if he needs... I think it's... Let me see here. NFL. Is it a home game or is it an away game? I'm curious what the weather scenario is. It is in Philly tomorrow. Let's see here. Let me see what the weather is going to be like for him. So in terms of Philly's weather, tomorrow's game, it says chance of showers, 6-mile-per-hour wind, 3% chance of rain. Yeah, no, you're fine. So in that scenario, yeah, there's a good chance that you could get potentially 10 to 12 points out of Jake Elliott. Then the rest of it's going to have to be done 13, 14 points from London. You just need him to score a touchdown, 5-6 receptions, 50, 60 yards and a touchdown. And I think we're in the promised land, which I think he's certainly capable of doing. It's just a matter of, is Kirk Cousins going to elevate him to that level? Let's hear. Doggy Hercules says, in a 10-man full PPR league, 2 flex, Baker, Hall, Pacheco, Monty, Ford, Pollard, Nico, DK, Neighbors, Pickens, Reed, Ingram. Just lost Pacheco, and I'm 0-2. What should I do? So, as it currently stands, look, Hall, Monty are great. Pollard is really good as well. So, even if you were going to miss Pacheco for a couple weeks, you have Pollard in his stead, which, again, filling in as a flex role, pretty good. You have Nico, you have DK Metcalf, you have Neighbors. I'm not moving any of those pieces. Hall, Monty, Pollard, DK, Neighbors, Nico, those are great. That's your 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 2 flex set to go for the rest of, the potential season. Now, what you do at tight end, again, you're dealing with an Evan Ingram injury. You could pick up Hunter Henry and or Mike Gesicki, Schoonmaker, all those available options for this upcoming week in his absence. Jaden Reed, again, once we get Jordan Love back, we'll have more value. And then at that point, you can sell him or potentially sell one of your other receivers and then promote him as your starter. But at this point, you're pretty much just in a position where I'm not panicking. You've got a lot of talent on this team. You're probably just trying to pick up the handcuff of Pacheco, get another tight end, and wait until Reed regains value to then potentially move him accordingly. Jake says, are we afraid of Kyren with no Kupp and Puka? Yes, I am. I'm deathly afraid that with no offensive line, because of how many injuries that they have accrued over the course of just 2 weeks, and no Puka and no Kupp, that Kyren is going to suffer greatly because of it. Let's see here. Steelers 12 says, how do we still feel about Rachaad White at the moment? I'm not feeling great after this performance, but I know that he is certainly capable of far more, so I'm not going to panic on him. Again, Rachaad White has proven last season and already this season in week 1 that he is a solid RB in fantasy. So just one bad performance isn't something that I'm going to completely turn on him for. You have to understand when he's taking on the Detroit Lions run stopping defense, that is the best run stop defense in the National Football League for quite literally the last 1.5 seasons. Going back to midway through the 2022 year, that Detroit Lions run stop defense has been elite since then. So considering that, I'm going to say fluke week, not a problem. We're okay. But again, the more usage that, of course, Bucky Irving gathers, it does build a case against him. MIGC says, should I grab a wide receiver for Brian Robinson Jr.? I have Cook and Jonathan Taylor, but after that, my running backs fall off hard in a 14-man league. Yeah, look, this is the same issue that I have with some of the other questions that were asked. If you are going to trade away Brian Robinson Jr. because you need wide receiver depth, that is fine, but as long as you have your handcuff. So you have to go pick up like Ray Davis for James Cook. You'd have to go pick up Trey Sermon. Like, you'd have to handcuff your running backs if you've got nothing else after that, and it falls off to just complete nothingness. So that you leave yourself vulnerable, and you'd require handcuffs on roster in order to sustain the value going forward, which sometimes your roster just can't afford to have 2 handcuffs on the bench, but you would need it at this circumstance. But yeah, considering you need wide receiver, I'd say let's go and see what kind of market he has based on his performances thus far. Dylan sends in a question, says trade Hill and Charbonnet for Kyren and Pickens. Also Singletary for Harris. Okay, hold on, wait. Traded Hill and Charbonnet for Kyren and Pickens. Don't love that at all. I'd rather have honestly had Hill. Well, considering you probably didn't know that Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp were going to be injured by week 3, obviously we're in a situation where it is what it is. It's a tough situation, but also Singletary for Harris. And okay, my team is Allen, Etienne, London, Collins, Charbonnet, RB2 this week. This bench, okay. Yeah, look. Jeez, traded Hill. I don't know about Kyren rest of the season. Dylan, that scares me, man. That scares me a lot. Quentin Johnston, sell high on him? Yeah, let's probably do that. I mean, I don't think a single soul started Quentin Johnston this week, but that's something that I'm not too interested in. Okay, look, when I look at like the Chargers game as a whole, Quentin Johnston is a guy that, sure, we could name as a potential waiver wire pickup, but ultimately, you know, I mean, how much value is he going to consistently have? He's going to have value if he scores touchdowns, but ultimately he hasn't done enough to garner 100% confidence. Sure, we'll pick him up and put him on our bench, but we're not starting him for a while until he proves otherwise. As for the Panthers, on the other side of that matchup, who allowed Quentin Johnston to score twice, we do not start Panthers for the remainder of the season until otherwise noted. I think I'm putting a full ban on ranking Panthers in my top 36 of any capacity over the next couple weeks. They're terrible. Bryce Young looks like such a flop of a quarterback. It is ridiculous. You know, it's interesting. We watched Caleb Williams for 3 hours here in this Sunday Night Football game, and I think to myself, man, number 1 overall picks, could it get worse? And I think about Bryce Young, and I think, holy moly, Bryce Young finished today with less than 100 passing yards. It is unreal how bad that Panthers organization has somehow made him as a quarterback. He was a solid college quarterback, but hey, it is what it is. You know what we need to see potentially, though? Speaking of solid college quarterbacks, if in fact, I'm just going to throw this out there, if in fact Tua Tagovailoa is going to be on a late potential rise in terms of like, hey, it's going to take him 8 weeks to recover, great. They should trade for Mac Jones. Just throwing it out there. Let's continue on. What other notes did I have here in terms of potential day? Mark Andrews still the tight end one for the Ravens. They decreased 12 personnel sets, and Mark Andrews played the vast majority of 11 personnel sets. Isaiah likely suffered in that circumstance. The Raiders offense, again, Bowers looks like the best tight end in the league, or one of the best. Adams has a bounce back game, which of course we anticipated because he always does. And Zamir White is getting his goal line touches stolen from him. And even though he is playing more snaps, he has less production than the week prior. So that doesn't bode well. Obviously, we took care of the Browns, the Patriots, the Seahawks, the Packers, the Colts, the Jets. Braylon Allen is probably the pickup just in case for Breece Hall managers, but also the fact that he is scoring individually scares me. Pollard is clearly an RB1 as of right now. What else do we have here? Schoonmaker for the Cowboys looks solid. Tolbert somehow outproduces Brandon Cooks to an extent to where it makes me regret every single Brandon Cooks take I had over the course of the last 7 days. But who would have guessed? Rico Dowdle gets himself more overall opportunities and snaps than Zeke, so keep an eye on that. That is beginning to trend in that direction. I think Chase Brown is potentially a droppable option at this point thus far. Let's see, what else we have here? Mike Gesicki looking good. Ultimately, where we are trending in the direction of is lack of production, injuries that are just going to dictate the future. That's it. You're going to have a couple alternative high upside players. BZ in the chat says sleeper alert, Alec Pierce. Yeah, Alec Pierce is, when you score a touchdown each of the last 2 weeks, you've now gathered my attention because that seems like that is the only that is the only wide receiver that is getting accurate or somewhat accurate overall targets from Anthony Richardson, because none of the other ones are getting a consistent volume of those. Sell Kamara high for Bijan or Breece Hall. I don't have an issue with that. That's fine by me. I would absolutely do so. No problem with that at all. Shane says, I'm up 47 in a full PPR. Play Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts. Do I win? You have to hope that Devontae Smith doesn't have a legacy game. If he goes for like 2 touchdowns, 8 grabs, and 90 yards or something like that, you're going to be in absolute shambles tomorrow. But I don't think he'll go for that kind of a high volume of number, even in the absence of A.J. Brown. So I think you'll still be fine. I think you can survive with the volume of points there. You just have to hope that, Jalen Hurts isn't scoring 3 touchdowns on the ground through the air as a combined total. Mac Jones, that's interesting. Why do you think him? I'm just thinking, what other quarterback in terms of a backup is worth trading for right now? Joe Flacco has already proven that he can start anywhere and play well. If I'm looking across the entire league in terms of backup quarterbacks, if Tua is not going to immediately play, they're still a playoff potential team. They have too much talent there at wide receiver and as offensive threats, and they've still got a solid defense, available and ready to go. If they don't have Tua for the next 8+ weeks or something of that extent, again, that's just a number I'm throwing out. Why wouldn't you trade for a quarterback that sure wasn't given much opportunity or much potential structure around him within a prior offense? You could just bring in a rookie on a rookie deal. It's not going to cost you much to move him over. I'm just throwing it out there. Let's see here. The Bears coaching staff play calling is yeah, listen, honestly, I think Shane Waldron, what he has unfortunately done is he has tried to inflate the ego of Caleb Williams, because Caleb does not look good. He has tried to artificially inflate his ego to give him more confidence by having so many completions that are bubble screens and near the line of scrimmage. Everything for an entire full quarter there at one point was a bubble screen or a screen pass or a check down. Nothing was going down the field. Everything was behind the line of scrimmage, which again, you cannot function as an offense if that is how you want to try to approach and move the ball down the field. It's just sad. Not good at all. Kamara is trending to be last year's Mostert. No. Look, there's a difference, right? Kamara we knew was going to be good because Kamara has always been good. Mostert has never always been good. Mostert is 31. Last year was 31. Kamara is 29, and he's been the number 1 overall RB before. So let's not compare the two. Kamara is a fantasy legend. Mostert is just a guy that one year had a good season. And going forward, I don't know if he's going to be more than that. What RB should I target for Brian Thomas Jr.? Oh, yikes. I don't think you can. what are you going to get for him? Like, he had one solid week with 4 receptions and a touchdown. And then this week, yes, he has some yardage, but like, I don't know if you can actually get perceivable value out of it to the extent to where you're like super happy with it. Cause I'm about to name a name and I don't know if you're going to like it. Like, sure, this week he had 90 yards, 2 receptions. That doesn't bode well considering he's had only 8 targets in 2 games. Like, if I tell you to go get Devin Singletary, that's not going to make you happy in this scenario, right? If I tell you to get Najee Harris, that won't make you happy either. So it's tough to even suggest those things to you because that's where I see his value at. He's just a lower end RB wide receiver 3 until given more opportunity. He is a guy that is going to rank between wide receiver 31 to 36 every week henceforth. And if he has a good week, good. If he doesn't, you didn't start him as a top 2 player, so you shouldn't have expected as much, right? Why is Cam Akers always fumbling? You got to ask him. That is a completely different conversation. But Cam Akers is going to be a value this week in terms of waiver wire pickups for sure. Joe Mixon and that ankle obviously was struggling to come back in that game. Eventually did, but ultimately with Dameon Pierce being out with his own injury, Cam Akers is probably a pickup just in case we end up seeing Joe Mixon miss this upcoming week. Better waiver wire wide receiver pickup in a non-PPR, Quentin Johnston or Naylor? I'd rather have Quentin Johnston going forward, to be honest. Primarily because we will see the return of Justin Jefferson at a full capacity, same as Jordan Addison, and same with Hawkinson, to the point where Naylor will never be on the field, while Quentin Johnston, in the absence of, DJ Chark, Josh Palmer dealing with injury, and of course him being a former number 1 wide receiver, a former first-round pick, and their clear number 1 wide receiver on the outside, it just makes it so where he is going to be in the matchups, playing the vast majority of snaps, and it will not kind of go away for any time going forward here. I think his usage in terms of just playing is going to be there. Naylor's will disappear. He's a short-term kind of option going forward. Bears offensive line has been trampled. Yeah, you're not wrong. But the fact of the matter is, if you know that your offensive line is going to be trampled and you have 2 tight ends of the caliber of Gerald Everett and Cole Kmet, run 12 personnel, chip block for both of the offensive tackles, and then run your routes. Yes, does it make it difficult? Sure, but you want to protect your investment, and your investment is your quarterback. And the only way to do so is to ensure that your offensive line isn't getting trampled. So either leave a running back in the backfield that is going to put his shoulder into a defensive end's ribs and break it, or have somebody chip blocking at the tight end position. Otherwise, you're just going to keep having this, it's insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result, and you're surprised, why aren't we moving the ball? I mean, why you're not moving the ball, because you're not helping your offensive line and you're running just bubble screens the whole day. And even when they run bubble screens, nobody's blocking down the field anyway. Brandon Cooks is a huge bust. Jalen Tolbert, their other wide receiver that, again, typically does nothing all season, decided to have himself a fantastic day today. Where do you rank Dobbins rest of the season? Is he an RB1, RB2, top 10? Definitely not top 10, not an RB1. He's probably as lower end RB2. Look, he's made huge runs. A 50-yard touchdown today, last week a 60 and a 40. When those big runs go away, the question is, can he still have sustained value, and are they going to prefer him over Gus Edwards if, in fact, he is inefficient in a certain circumstance? Obviously, he's had relatively good matchups as of late, but I'd say he's just an RB2 as of right now. He doesn't have much receiving utilization, which kind of lowers his potential for upside in that kind of a capacity. Kamikaze says, I have Richardson, London, Pittman, Hall, Jacobs, Hunter Henry, Christian Kirk, Singletary, Deontay Johnson, Eckler, Myers, Braylon Allen. Ingram is in my IR with Josh Downs. Any moves I should make? Listen, Richardson, you kind of have to leave as is. London hopefully will play well tomorrow, but Hall and Jacobs are great. Hunter Henry's great. Pittman and Kirk are pretty much going to your bench. The issue is you have Pittman, Kirk, Deontay Johnson, Myers. Your wide receivers are pretty much as bad as it gets based on week 1 and 2 performances. So you're pretty much left in a situation where you kind of have to play them again, because I'm not telling you, I really don't want you to go out and try to sell Jacobs or Hall in order to get a return on wide receiver value, because really, if you're going to lose a piece of that caliber and you bring in a running back that is a lesser form and they also start to fall off of, the proverbial cliff, you're going to be in a pretty busted situation here. So you kind of have to wait until Pittman recovers some sort of way, or again, you could try to sell Hunter Henry, try to get a tight end, sell Anthony Richardson to try to recoup wide receiver value, and see if you can hit the waiver wire and pick up Geno Smith and just go from there. Like literally, that's the only way. Otherwise, you gotta have to hold, considering you don't have much depth on your bench. It's tough. Gus Bus just a handcuff now? I don't know. I don't think so. He played more snaps today. Like that in itself doesn't speak to being a handcuff. Are you worried about DJ Moore? Yeah, of course. Caleb Williams is not as good as we thought. I mean, we thought that Justin Fields wasn't the greatest downfield passer. It looks like Caleb Williams does not exist as a downfield passer in any sort of capacity. So definitely a rough scenario going on there. Surely Zamir will be a smash start next week, right? Let's see. Who do the Raiders play next week? NFL Week 3. Let's see. The Raiders play against the Carolina Panthers. I mean, you would assume that he should be, right? And we're going to hope. But again, when Alexander Mattison is stealing the goal line carries, that doesn't bode well for the potential of Zamir White, even in a advantageous matchup. Marvin Harrison, go Cards. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that he obviously had himself a great performance. So did the other rookie wide receiver, Malik Neighbors. They're going to continue to trend in the positive directions that they obviously were meant to. Just week 1 was shambles. It is what it is. Cooper is not making my starting lineup until he proves, yeah, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. It's really not Cooper. It's more like Deshaun Watson can't sustain a wide receiver of any value. So until then, I don't have an issue with that statement. Tank Dell lost me the week. Yeah, that's tough. That is tough. We would have thought that Tank Dell, Xavier Worthy, some of these players that are in that middle range wide receiver conversation, Amari Cooper, could have had solid weeks. All of them just duds across the board. Murderer's row in that kind of section. Andrew, did you get a nap? I did. Of course, man. You got to take a nap on Sunday. I mean, if you don't take a nap on Sunday, when else are you going to do it? Let's see here. What do you think about Mac Jones? Would be a good fit with the Dolphins? You're adding somebody else? Okay, never mind. Let's just leave that as that. Hold on to Brian Robinson moving forward or trade him. Brian Robinson can be held on to, assuming you need him to be your RB2. If you have a lot of depth at running back, you could try to move him, but it's just a matter of like who's going to be interested in him. If it's me, like Olave didn't have that good of a week this week. I'm going after and still trading for Olave. Like that's still high value wide receiver that I want. He didn't have that great of a week to where like people are, oh man, I can't move him. He's too valuable to me. Wait for Kelsey to have a good game, then trade. I don't have an issue with that. That's fine. Let's see how long it takes for him to have a good game. You know, that's the issue. DK for Tank in London. Let's wait until we see what London's capable of tomorrow before we move on and send DK Metcalf in that direction. What do we think? What do we do with Coleman and McConkey? Again, they're rookies. They're going to have up and down weeks. Coleman again is at the mercy of Josh Allen that doesn't want to establish a number 1 receiver outside of Khalil Shakir, which again was kind of expected to occur. Thank you. Appreciate it, Jersey. All right, guys. How long have I been here for? Probably an hour, I want to say. Yeah. That's pretty much all I wanted to do. I just wanted to go ahead and check in, go over a little bit of, again, tomorrow I'm going to go ahead and put out my video in regards to buy low, sell high, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks, etc. Just players across the board that I'm trying to target, why I'm trying to specifically go after them, and then players that I'm trying to sell high based on recent performances in which they've gone ahead and played far beyond their overall potential of success that we would have anticipated. Now, some of these players that have had big performances, like a Tony Pollard, I don't expect to go anywhere. I think Pollard is going to have value sustained for the remainder of the year. So he's not a sell high candidate, but there are other options in this kind of space that are going to have value. But as it currently stands, that's where I'm going to call it for tonight. Again, thank you. I'll set that up tomorrow. Buy low, sell high. And then on Tuesday, we'll talk about waiver wire. Wednesday, running backs, wide receivers on Thursday. Probably either hidden gems or quarterbacks and tight ends on Friday. One of the two will come out, but either way, thank you everybody for swinging along. For those of you who sent super chats, greatly appreciate that. For those of you who continue to support the channel with the Patreon, and of course, the Underdog sign up, of course, using code Andrew, making that first time deposit minimum of $10 to get my rankings every Sunday. I appreciate it. Thank you. How confident are you with what does that say? Devontae after today? I mean, I was confident with him last week. It wasn't really an issue. It's just a matter of like trying to get used to the combination of him and Gardner Minshew, which again, they're starting to build that rapport. And Gardner's way better than what Jimmy Garoppolo and Aiden O'Connell presented last season. So we knew that Devontae Adams would have a bounce back game, and I'm glad he did it and will continue to do so. God's Gang says, flex Neighbors or roll the dice with Worthy. You always flex Neighbors in this scenario. I don't think I would ever roll the dice with Worthy unless like Neighbors was going to be blanket covered by Darrelle Revis for a specific game. You know what I mean? Luis says, don't have the Discord anymore. No, I don't have a public Discord. It's all private now. Do I sell Debo high? I wouldn't go as far as that. No, I wouldn't go as far as that. I think Debo is someone that I'm still holding on to for sure. All right, guys, that's going to be it. I'm going to cue the music. I appreciate y'all. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday night. And I will be back tomorrow for Buy Low, Sell High. Thank you. Good night.